The next panel is Techno-empathy and the marketing mix. Technology's long been used to make patients' lives more convenient, right? At least in theory. But most such efforts have prized efficiency over empathy, as technology often does. And it's why the industry's shift toward using technology to form more human connections with marginalized groups has been received so very warmly. This panel will highlight the programs and practices that have ushered in a new era of techno-empathy. Join me in welcoming to the stage, please, Sanjeev Menon, Head of Partnerships at UBI, Dr. Jenny Yu, the Chief Health Officer at Healthline Media, Jeff Davis, GM Biopharma at IX Layer, Alex Hart, Chief Marketing Officer at Verily, and back to the stage is our friend, my colleague, Jack O'Brien, Digital Editor of MM+M.
Before we get started, and apropos of absolutely nothing, you have to try the oxygen bar. I just did it. Feel wonderful. Absolutely phenomenal. James is doing a great job out there. So that's just my one plug. But it's great to be up here again. Kind of a change of pace from the payer conversation that we had earlier. We're going to focus on techno-empathy. And it was really interesting. We were having the planning call, and it's kind of how I wanted to start this panel as well, is just what that is for a baseline for our audience to understand. Sanjeev, if you want to start off the conversation, when techno-empathy is thrown out there, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I was really hoping not to go first.
Popcorn.
Yeah, I'm joking. So I got to be honest. When I first heard the term, when my marketing team told me I'd be speaking on the subject, I had no idea what it was. And initially, the first thing that I thought of was user experience, right? Isn't this very similar to UX design? And then I did more than 5 seconds of thinking and realized that this is a really important subject that we need to talk about more. When it comes to designing technology, a lot of the times people who are building technology are building it for people who look like them. And that, at a philosophical level, that goes user interface, so your design element, but also, we're an AI company, so we have data sets that we look at, and our data sets are biased. We know this. So starting to think outside of people who look like us, and what does the realm of people look like, and especially in a diverse sort of environment like the United States. It's about removing bias from the technology that you're building.
Which is going to be such a key component of this panel, too. And we've seen enough studies and research that's gone into the fact that there is obviously a lot of promise in AI, but it's only as good as the data that you feed it. And obviously it comes down to the biases and all that sort of stuff. So we'll get into that. But I again want to just continue down the line with what techno-empathy means to you. Jenny, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, from my perspective, it's about accessibility, inclusivity, in a way where the words and the language that is part of the digital technology meets where people are, so that they can see themselves. I think Novo Nordisk made this comment earlier where, right at the end of an ad, rather than saying, go see your healthcare provider with Wegovy, it was more about, hey, check your benefits. And that's simple, but that's enough than to say, we know these challenges and we are helping you to think through it. And so words, language, from that perspective.
What about you, Jeff?
It sounds like, Sanjeev, you and I had a similar journey of thought on this. Techno-empathy, kind of same thing, reflected on that. And, working for a technology company, tend to get very focused and then kind of get stuck on like product design, solution design. Then you go to, okay, well, what is the actual patient experience? What's the patient journey? Is that mapping to solution design? And then, then I thought about like several current customer conversations and realized like they were kind of framed as, user experience, final solution design, but underlying that was actually, and this is very encouraging, like these are all pharma customers, they were very focused on how do we really tightly integrate empathy for what are often very diverse healthcare populations it can't be one size fits all, and then let's work our way back up to solution design. So that was kind of my empathy as an underlying kind of thing before you get to where we all want to kind of rush to be, quickly to solution design and bringing things to market.
Last but not least, Alex.
I think the one-size-fits-all and moving to the recognition of the diversity of the people who interact with your technology is so important. So I think about it as how do you connect and understand anyone who might be interacting with your technology, and so being really mindful of the different people, what they need, and really kind of understanding how people engage. So there's an analytics component, I think, on the back end as well.
And I'm really curious because it seems like it's tying in with a lot of the themes that we've seen from the previous panels, where it's like AI is obviously this really powerful technology that, for better or worse, is going to change the world as we know it. But the empathetic angle, that kind of human touch, needs to be incorporated into that. Where do we stand right now in terms of being able to actually put that into, the capabilities that are coming out to us? Or I know that obviously being able to use techno-empathy to support our marketing initiatives is another crucial thing. Where do we stand right now from your own perspective?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Yeah.
So I think one of the great opportunities of AI is hyper-personalization. We're able to take immense amount of data, combine that with, at least with our platform, we're able to combine that with the zero-party data that we're capturing from our clients to deliver experiences that are tailored to them. And prior to, I guess, this development in AI's capabilities, that sort of personalization was a lot harder to do. So I'd say, yeah, hyper-personalization and being able to really zero in on that person using this technology at this point in time is really important and something we can do right now.
Alex, what do you think in terms of where we stand on incorporating techno-empathy into our different initiatives?
Yeah, there's aspects that I am so excited about and things that I think we're doing today, and also an area I think with AI we have to be really cautious about as marketers. So, today I think the opportunity to hyper personalize and optimize campaigns. One of the spaces that Verily is in enrolling and recruiting people into clinical studies and helping our partners accelerate how fast we can enroll patients into studies, and we do a lot of hyper-personalization. We really kind of understand and test hundreds and hundreds of different ad creatives, really trying to understand what is going to connect an individual to a particular study. So if we're looking at a depression study, if we're looking at, really trying to bring diverse people into a study, having multiple rounds of creative and being able to understand what individually can work for you. And so we employ a lot of AI and kind of optimization tactics to do that. I think AI is only as good as your data, though. So really having an understanding of, are we collecting enough data to be able to understand the diverse groups that might be engaging with our technologies is a really important point. Bias in AI still, I think at this point, is really something we have to be thinking about and mindful of as we deploy.
And the answer isn't just more data. I think that's something that people have kind of, as we've gone out of this era of big data, it's not just data for data's sake. It has to be the right data. It has to be appropriate and applicable. Jenny, I'm curious about, from your perspective, we were talking about this on the planning call, about being able to be equitable as we go about rolling out, different techno-empathy supported initiatives. Where does equity have a role in this whole conversation?
And I think, that's important to think about the data as being the truthful data is what you need from an output perspective. But when you also think about the human touch, the prompts and the questions and thinking and reevaluating the outputs that the machine is currently putting out is important from an equity standpoint. Because if you don't have the right data and you don't have the right questions in which you're asking that allows sort of the AI ML models to have the right outputs, then the equity piece is not going to get captured.
And who has to be responsible for that when it comes to like actually coming up with that list of questions, or like, you know, how does that work from an organizational standpoint?
Yeah, and I think, from our organization, there's a group of people who are working on everything. And so I think it's important to have the diverse perspectives at the table as you're thinking about your diverse audiences. And more than just the sort of, different kind of demographics, ethnographics, like they're also just the perspective of medical, editorial, product, and design. And so when you bring all of that kind of very rich perspectives to the table, that's how you're going to get the right questions to allow for the right outputs as we're thinking about equity.
Jeff, did you want to hop in here with your thoughts on where equity fits in this conversation?
Sure. Maybe I'll do something controversial and not start with AI in my answer. But
as long as you get there by the end of it.
We are testing a bot that helps patients interpret patient-initiated testing results. So we have that in the pipe now. But in terms of personalization, I think it's, for us, we're focused on one like very particular healthcare problem, and that is the gross under-testing across virtually every condition, right? In the traditional testing experience, you go to a PCP, then you're referred to a service center, et cetera. Like we're very focused on removing as much of that friction as possible. So what does that mean? We don't want to create kind of a virtual version of the same experience. We want to make it better. So as part of that, how do we like rapidly type people in as they come into like our testing flow, so we can type them into things like, well, what type of kit should we send you? What type of collection device would be best for you as a parent collecting a sample from a child versus a parent versus an elderly parent, et cetera, and then pulling that through to things like, well, how should we present results to this type of person? Not a patient, but a person. And there are many solution design considerations around that. Sometimes it becomes apparent you really need to like park a clinician in front of those results. But for other personas, they want to get the results themselves, then possibly talk to a clinician. So I think it has like many, many implications on kind of the front end, and as you draw patients through an experience all the way to kind of the end of whatever chapter that is.
And what sort of progress have you as an organization made on that front? It sounds like you've been going down a bunch of different avenues and being able to put this into place.
So I think we've made progress, that's for sure. But sometimes it feels like, wow, we're so kind of out on the far edge of this. And then other days it feels more like we're barely getting started. So like I'll give you like a politician's answer. We're somewhere in the middle, right? Like a lot of progress made, ton to go. I would also add that in this part of the market, like the Lilly Direct model, which I think was referenced probably a couple times today. I think that's thrown several ripples across the pond. But I think underlying that is like the growing realization on biopharma's part, like this whole kind of like different continuum of healthcare, it's happening with or without them. And I think the choice that we're seeing biopharmas increasingly make is, do I want to observe this, just keep an eye on it, or do I want to figure out how to meaningfully participate in it? So I think that's super exciting.
If I can add comment there, I think what you're talking about in terms of the digital experience for focusing on the patient is needed. And I think that's where the empathy comes in terms of using the tools and the technology to actually improve the experience, whether physical or digital, and however that those two may converge together. And we're just behind from a healthcare perspective.
But we're making progress, Jenny. Yeah.
I want to remind our audience, we're about halfway through this, that you can send in questions through Slido. We had one that came in through, and it said, can you provide examples of how techno-empathy has successfully improved patient or HCP engagement?
I can give a not a marketing example, but a Verily example, which I think is really interesting.
Sure.
We just published research on a simulated study, but really trying to understand bias in AI. And so the question was, if I'm going to use like a word I haven't used on a panel before, restless multi-arm bandits, which is
what was that?
restless multi-arm bandits. It's a data science, basically reinforcement learning in the AI space of how you build recommenders. So on a website, right, you might recommend next best content, things like that. The data science, like the algorithm behind the scenes, there are many, but restless multi-arm bandits is one that is particularly used. And so one of the tests that Verily researchers wanted to do, and they did this in partnership with Google, was to understand if you actually built diverse groups and actually train the reinforcement learning on multiple groups, would the outcome for patients be even better on engagement? Would you serve different content or different recommended care pathways to different communities of color, different based on social determinants of health and what have you? And so through that simulation, could find that patient outcomes were 10% better on A1C levels in the diabetes space, and also that engagement lasted longer. So they were engaging more in their care pathways and their engagement in the healthcare apps that we were running. So it was really interesting to see this bit of research, very early days, but they kind of formulated this notion of an equitable model, and how do you actually deliver AI by design for diversity? So just an early indication that this can work.
And we have very specific resources hubs for different audiences so that they feel that they can see themselves in the content that they're reading. So for example, if you're reading about obesity and weight loss and the lifestyle management in addition to a GLP-1, to have culturally sort of competent and relevant, content around nutrition and, recipes are important in addition to sort of just talking about the interactions and side effects of drugs, since that's what we do on our org.
It intuitively makes sense. You're connecting with the right content to the right person at the right time. We all, as marketers, kind of talk about how much we want to deliver that, and so kind of seeing it out in the data is really great.
And maybe just to talk a little bit about what we're doing at UB. Mm-hmm. So on the patient-facing side, we have a symptom checker that's used by 9 million patients each month. We are originally from Japan, so it's not 9 million in the US. We served 2 million Americans last year. And our primary goal is to guide everyone to better care. And so when we say everyone, we're not talking about Joe, millennial, middle income in New York City. It's really everyone. So I want Lucy, who's 65 in rural Mississippi, to have that access to the same sort of care guidance. So when we first translated the platform to the United States, we had this unique experience of taking something that worked very well for a homogenous culture to the crazy diversity that is the United States, and having to incorporate ethnic disease prevalence data, having to redo usability testing across age groups. What I'm quite happy to report is we now have over 20% of our platform over the age of 60 that use the platform. We have over 20% of the platform that are from underrepresented ethnic groups. And in terms of outcomes from that, the patient-reported outcomes, at least, are that we are able to increase their care-seeking activity. So driving that change in behavior through better engagement by over 70%. And I think in terms of, creating better patient outcomes, that's a fantastic win for us.
I was about to say, you can't ask for much more on that front. Jeff, is there anything that you want to add on to this?
I can definitely throw another log on the fire on this. And same kind of theme, I guess, like anecdotal, but like looks like a really encouraging KPI. Maybe I'll just set the baseline for a second. Overall, in the United States, 70% of all diagnoses are based on a pivotal lab test or tests, right? Of all those tests ordered, 40% never get taken, right? There's a massive drop-off. So, like in terms of positive KPIs that we are seeing in market now, we've we just recently concluded a large payer program around, highly prevalent condition, but the population that we reached and activated for testing was viewed as like, this is going to be really hard, like very diverse, big Medicaid population, like just kind of like a lot of like what is at least historically viewed as these are hard to activate people, right? So remember, the baseline is 40% just in the traditional setting, never get taken. We saw an activation rate like north of 60 or so percent to get tested. And then remember, we're also connecting them to care. So when we see numbers like that, like our first kind of response is like, in a hard to activate patient population, we should be able to treat that as like, hey, if we can do it there, we can scale this, right? That's kind of like the main point. And then how does it compare to what we know are the traditional activation rates for testing and care? So we saw kind of like 150% compared to baseline. So I think that those kinds of KPIs plus what you guys are describing, I think those give you pointers to like, yeah, these things do make a difference, right?
Absolutely. Those are meaningful results to share right there. I wanted to bring in another question we got. It was actually, Jeff, I think you can probably start this one off and then we can move around the panel. It has to do with Lilly Direct. And can you talk about the macro trend of the movement toward more convenient care? How is this trend at its core empathetic? I think we saw a lot of that during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make a strong argument that COVID, like the lockdown in particular, was, a forcing function for many things, and around like as human beings, we all got very used to like the notion of taking a home test, for example, talking to a doctor on a Zoom call, essentially. Like we all got used to that. That probably compressed, 10, 12 years into 18 months. So I think that kind of set the stage, if you will. And then you have partners, many of them startups, but not all, like focusing on how do we take these behaviors that have changed and how do we really align solutions to those changed behaviors. And I think one of the outputs of that has been things like Lilly Direct. And I think Lilly Direct is also notable. That's not a new model. That's been in market with other manufacturers, long before Lilly Direct. I think one of the things that was notable is they actually did a lot of PR around it. Like they made it very public. Like this is about a commitment to care versus just kind of an alternative distribution channel.
But there are parallels there with what we saw during COVID. I mean, a lot of hospitals had telehealth systems set up. It was only after we couldn't leave our house because the air was poisoned that we were able to then tap into those capabilities. No,
I think that's, I totally agree. I mean, I think that's like one without the other. I think like it compressed time. And I think if you didn't have like this massive conditioning event around doing things like getting a home test and telehealth, I think, like things would probably be slower.
And I was going to say that just having access, right, to care, whether it's medication or doctor, using technology is the empathy piece, and that's the Lilly Direct model. And the convenience piece is so important for people, and remembering that, just if a virtual care didn't work because the equity piece came in, if you didn't have high, broadband internet, and you couldn't get in front of a virtual care in the right way, it's okay just to pick up the telephone and connect with someone else. And during that COVID time, we saw that. So even when doctors called a patient, that just reassured them so much. And I think that's the piece that we have to kind of continue to think about. But convenience doesn't equal quality. And we need to think about convenience equaling quality as well, so that, for low acuity care things where you can use, potential models like Lilly Direct, but then for the more complex and edge cases, what are the off-ramps and the path to then get people into the right space? And when we're thinking about the UX design, but from a physical and a digital experience, if people feel that it's fragmented or disconnected, they're not coming back for that experience anymore. So we got to continue to think about that.
Alex, you want to come in?
I think about design too. I also think about my mom. During COVID, my mom has lived with chronic pain for decades. And when she had to go virtual and download the app and figure out how to do the call with her doctor, and the font size was too small, and there were 20 clicks you had to do, that's not empathy. Right? Like that, it just, the technology kind of matched with like how she could engage with the design, like everything broke down. There's so many examples of that, I think, in just looking at the technology and the user interface and the design and how to connect in the right ways. And you started with the fundamental, if you don't even have access and Wi-Fi or broadband, it just doesn't work. But it's the empathy piece is so important as you just think about every step of the way and how do you help people connect.
And I think that actually leads into a good question that we had submitted here, which leads into your point, Alex, which is the current healthcare system is notoriously unempathetic. That's putting it lightly. What do you think are the biggest things that you can improve with techno-empathy?
Trying to fix the broken healthcare system. Oh, God. This is a fun question.
Trying to tackle 1/5 of the American economy.
So, look, providers, doctors are overburdened. They have KPIs to meet. They're time poor. So if we're being empathetic in designing solutions, we got to look at how can technology be the best assistant to remove these pains for the providers. And sometimes it doesn't have to be anything really sexy, right? Workflow optimization, making SOAP notes easier, taking, like, what does Nuance do? I'm forgetting the word right now, the term, but dictation to text. Things like that remove the administrative burden for the providers, that give them more time to spend with the patient, I think is really where I'd like to see more technology solutions focused. There are a lot right now, but I'd like to see more adoption.
What about you, Jenny?
Yeah, what I would say, so I agree with that, but more than that, as a provider, I remember imagine having like the 20 same conversations with a patient throughout your day, or 50. It's like you talking to a toddler and you feel like you have to repeat the same conversation over and over again just to get the message and the information to transfer into knowledge. That is what makes physicians also feel or become unempathetic or comes across as unempathetic. And that's not just physicians, but nurses, the entire care team within the healthcare system. And so in addition to those administrative burdens, it's also that. So when we think about solutions and information and what people need to understand about their health more, we need technology and AI to go upstream and solve for those things so that there's information for people. That information becomes knowledge and changes behavior in such a way that we're not, as a healthcare system, we're not feeling like we have to continue to have the same conversation over and over again. That's what I really feel sort of bullish about AI and technology and how it can solve for some of those things as well.
Bullish on personalization of the actual full healthcare experience, not like a point solution, like this is my part of it, I'm going to make this go faster, but like really an increase on personalization across the whole kind of patient care, call it patient journey, continuum, whatever, and speed, right? Like, and I think Lily is a pointer in that direction. Is it a perfect experience? Not yet. Will it ever be? I don't know. But is it additive to and creating like a totally different path that for a certain cohort of people, it will be more personalized, it will be a better experience, and it will be faster. I think that's those two things, personalization combined with speed, are the things that I'm the most excited about on this.
Take us home, Alex.
I think it's about thinking through the patients you serve, the people you serve, all the way through whatever process you're responsible for. So, upstream as much as possible, designing for the people you have in mind and really understanding any, subgroups and understanding the kind of their point of view. And then at the end, really measuring engagement and understanding at a deeper level kind of who is responding, who might not, and understand where you can learn next to improve the experience.
Excellent. Finish that with 4, 3, 2, One, we did it. Look at that. Thank you all. I want to thank our panelists here. It was a great conversation. Thank you.